Sixers Media Day has came and went. The first practice has arrived and the season is inching closer, but Quentin Grimes remains unsigned. The last loose end that needs to be tied for the Sixers offseason continues to go down to the wire, with October 1st being the deadline for him to decide on his qualifying offer. For the first time across these entire negotiations that we have numbers reported for what these conversations are looking like and what the potential gap is between Quentin Grimes directly and the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, obviously, this is an issue that I wish was wrapped up for quite some time, that I've voiced my frustration on this channel plenty of times about this specific situation dragging out, limiting their opportunity for keeping other free agents. With Gershon Yabusele is the clear-cut example of that. The order of operations from the NBA salary cap making it necessary that Quentin Grimes was inked up first, and that has not happened to this point. But Daryl Morey spoke to the media, and we have some reports that we got to get into today. I want to start right there with what was said at Media Day. Shout out to Sam Ostry of The Score tweeting out, Daryl Morey on the Quentin Grimes situation, quote, I think we'll get a resolution in the next few days, hopefully. We're excited to bring him back. He's a big part of what we do and into the future if we can get it resolved. And the most important note to make here is Quentin Grimes is going to be a member of the Philadelphia 76ers this year. There never was an if, and, or but about that. The question remains, what is that dollar figure and for what length of time? That he is a restricted free agent. There is no other team that could swoop in here and make an offer that the Sixers cannot match. The only team remotely in that type of position is the Brooklyn Nets, and the Philadelphia 76ers can simply sit there and say, you know what, we're matching that, because that is the beauty of restricted free agency. But we did get a peek behind the curtain on what these specific conversations are rolling with, and I do want to refer to this article from Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, who I think did an excellent job portraying both sides of the situation. So we're going to start right off with the Sixers' perspective of negotiations before we get into the full numbers here. And what Scotto writes is, from Philadelphia's perspective, there are several variables to consider amid the restricted free agency negotiations with Grimes. Over the summer, Andre Drummond, $5 million, and Kelly Oubre, $8.38 million, each exercised their player options for this season. Both players have been mentioned as a trade candidate to create more money to re-sign Grimes while staying below the second apron, but no trade talks have come to fruition to this point. Furthermore, Philadelphia is loaded at the guard position with Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, and third overall pick VJ Edgecombe. The 76ers want to figure out if McCain's production over the first 23 games of his rookie campaign is sustainable before he suffered a lateral meniscus tear, and whether or not Edgecombe will become the player they believe he can before committing big money to Grimes, with max players already in the roster, including Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Maxey. Meanwhile, it's worth noting that McCain just suffered a UCL tear in his right thumb during a workout ahead of Media Day and is working with the 76ers and consultant to figure out a treatment plan going forward. McCain's playing time would likely be filled by Edgecombe and Grimes. Outside of the 76ers, the Brooklyn Nets are the only team currently with the cap space to theoretically tender an offer sheet, but that possibility hasn't gotten much traction, league sources told Hoops Hype. So the point to note here is this is not the Sixers negotiating from a point of desperation. That they know they're not negotiating against anyone, so there is not this urgency to up the offer. Now, I understand that deadlines get things done, and I think Daryl Morey very much leans on that principle, and that's why we're having this conversation this late in the offseason. That Morey was completely comfortable allowing the backs getting pushed against the wall before a decision was overall made. Now, to flip the script here and take a look at the negotiations from Grimes' perspective, we're going to refer to the next portion of Scotto's article. He writes, towards the start of free agency, Grimes and his agent, David Bauman of the Family, pitched a long-term scenario where his starting salary would be closer to the $17.5 million to $21 million range, with team flexibility on the back end, league sources told Hoops Hype. More recently, one concept loosely pitched by Philadelphia was a 4-year, $39 million structure, Bauman told Hoops Hype. That would essentially be Grimes' qualifying offer with an 8% average annual raise each season of the contract. Such a concept would also equate to only 5.6% of the salary cap, which is well below the typical percentage of the cap for starters or six men. At this point, the 76ers have formally offered Grimes a 1-year deal that's slightly higher than his qualifying offer of $8.7 million, with the caveat that he'd waive his no trade clause, league sources told Hoops Hype. For Grimes to waive his no-trade clause flexibility on any one-year deal, Philadelphia's offer would preferably be somewhere north of the non-taxpayer mid-level exception and $19 million range, league sources told HoopSite. This range would maintain Philadelphia's flexibility below the second apron. In addition, should a team over the salary cap trade for Grimes, it would be able to offer him a 20% salary increase from the range noted above during free agency in the summer of 2026. So the most likely scenario that we are staring down the barrel of, and what I view as the worst case scenario for both sides here, will be Quentin Grimes taking his qualifying offer. And why this would be the worst case scenario from the Sixers perspective is you lose a little bit of your leverage here. That next summer he will be an unrestricted free agent. And sure, you retain his bird rights. You do have a chance to ink him to a long-term contract if he goes through the duration of next season and proves that everything that he put on the table last year was legitimate. But you also have a chance to straight up lock this guy up for multiple years. And the most important thing to me is I want to see a sample size of what all these guards look like on the floor together, or what their roles can be. What is the complement of Quentin Grimes playing next to Tyrese Maxey? How does Grimes look like next to McCain? Where does VJ Edgecombe fit into this entire mix? These are all questions that I need answered on the court. And for that to happen, these guys got to be under contract here. Now, for Grimes directly here, the priority is clearly being made that I need my bag. This is his opportunity to get paid. This is the time that if you're off to a successful start to your NBA career, that this is the timeline for his first major payday. And for Grimes specifically, you better believe that is a guy that is chasing it based on the level of uncertainty that the start of his career has brought on. Let's not forget that this guy has been on 4 different NBA teams already in his NBA career. That across 4 seasons, he's put on 4 different jerseys, that being the New York Knicks, the Detroit Pistons, the Dallas Mavericks, and of course, most recently, the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, where I have a little bit of a problem with some of these hypotheticals is I can't overlook the fact that Quentin Grimes has done it. That we're talking about a dude who last year averaged 14.6 points per game, 4.3 rebounds, 3.0 assists, shot 38.5% from 3 on pretty significant volume there. This was a guy who made the most of his opportunity in what was a season by the organization here. Yes, he did those things. He scored 40 plus points. He looks like a dominant offensive talent with the most basketball freedom that he had been allowed in the entirety of his NBA career. With all that being said, it did not equate to winning in any sort of form. Now, this is not Grimes' fault whatsoever. The season was lost far before he even got to Philadelphia. But you can't exactly look at this guy as he can buoy our organization into, a bit of relevancy in the way that you might look at a star player who would put up a similar type of numbers there. Now, a couple more specifics on the overall contract situation is I did want to float out the first off this reported number. This coming from Gina Mizell here. This is the first time, and Michael Scott with the same report, that we've heard specific numbers on what a long-term deal could look like. That the Sixers' first official offer to Quentin Grimes was a 4-year, $39 million contract. I do think that this is low here. That comes out to roughly 9.75 in average annual value there. When you're factoring in that this is an $8.7 million qualifying offer, that is not much of a bump of a raise for a guy that, in Grimes' perspective, I totally get feeling like I've proved myself to a level more beyond what that pay increase indicates there. And that's sort of where we're at the roadblock here. Now, I think this would be a bad decision by Quentin Grimes to bet on himself here, is you really are playing a risk, that you now set your market for this specific season, that everything you've done in the past kind of gets taken off the table, and if you want to run down the track record of NBA history, it does not typically bode well for those guys that do the one-year bet on himself, that it is more likely than not that you end up in that veterans minimum kind of a pile of contracts than it is that you do get a massive payday. This isn't anything that I'm saying critical of Grimes specifically, that is just the facts of the track record of how historically things have played out here. Now, the balloon payment in itself is a bit interesting to me, and this has been floated out once again, that we do have this report saying that the Sixers, we first have that, and then the balloon report stating that Quentin Grimes wants a 1-year balloon payment from the 76ers worth close to $20 million. This coming from Jake Fisher there. The benefit of this from Grimes' perspective is for waiving your no-trade clause, basically assuming that somebody's going to be footing the bill for the rest of this in the second half of the season, but I need that money to make sure that I'm cool with that there. This also rushes the timeline to an extent for me, that you basically have to make that call if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, that if Grimes isn't the fit out of this collection of guards, which I think is too premature to say at this current time being here, you're going to have to make that decision mid-season. When you're already starting off with Jared McCain, going to miss the beginning of the season with his UCL issue there's not going to be a ton of time to see how all these pieces fit together, and I don't love how this plays out. I do hope cooler heads prevail. I do hope Daryl Morey steps up to an extent and offers some sort of offer on the table that can reach a long-term agreement, but it is frustrating that it's taken so long. We also have the reports of that Grimes' agent is pushing for the deadline, which is October 1st for that qualifying offer, to be pushed back a week until October 8th to give a bit more time for negotiations. I think that makes sense for both sides and is something that I would love to see happen there, but at this stage in the game, we are still just theorizing here, that we do not have the facts of that. So I'm going to still stay on my toes, and every little update we'll be back to report with Quentin Grimes here, but nonetheless, the season is right around the corner, and it does seem like we are not all that much closer to reaching an agreement here. But let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments there. Where is your level of panic meter? Once again, I wanted it to be made clear that Quentin Grimes will be starting the season with the Philadelphia 76ers. It is just a matter of what dollar figure and for how long beyond that. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Appreciate you guys for tuning into this video. As always, we are fully back right here on Sixers Digest as the season is set to get underway. So make sure you're tapped in and hanging with us for the entire upcoming season. The best way by doing that is by hitting that subscribe button below, dropping a like on this video, giving your thoughts below, and I'll be back to talk with you next time. Peace.